Welcome to Still City Growth. I'm your host, Bill Ildenfritz. Each week, we'll explore the passions, expertise, and experiences of business owners and founders in the greater Pittsburgh area. Still City Growth is proudly sponsored by Murphy Business of Pittsburgh, committed to providing exceptional services to meet all your business needs. Let's dive in. Good, as you kind of just mentioned, you can't just throw things against the wall. What makes a good leader to be able to maybe put that culture into place successfully? Good morning. Really excited to talk to my next guest. She is a licensed therapist for over 20 years. She has spent over 6 years consulting for small, solo, and group practices. She's a serial entrepreneur who has owned over 4 businesses. She's a founder and CEO of Move Forward Counseling. Alison Pidgeon, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Good. So this is the first question we always ask our guest. What is the number one most important strategy for growing your business?
I think you have to learn how to delegate. I think that a lot of entrepreneurs want to delegate, but they don't know how. And then they also don't know how to check to make sure it's going well once they do delegate. So people tend to err on the side of like micromanaging because they're like, how else am I going to know if everything's okay? Or letting it all go and not checking at all. So I think you have to figure out what are those systems and processes you can put in place to make sure things are running well after you've delegated them.
I agree with the delegation part, but it's very hard. Everybody
It
thinks
is.
they're the best at it, right? Or
Yeah.
they don't know how to don't know how to tell somebody to delegate, or how to delegate and how to take over. Any thoughts on that? How do you kind of implement it? Delegation.
Yeah, I look at it as um I'm really going to become the bottleneck if I don't delegate. And so I'm really holding back the growth of my business by not doing it. And I think that we have what's called I think Mike Michalowicz, who's a famous business book author, calls it like the Superman effect. Like we're convinced that nobody else can do it as well as we can. And I think what I've learned along the way is that everybody has their strengths and their weaknesses. And there are definitely other people who are better at doing certain things than I am. And so it's actually, best for the business and for me to delegate that out to somebody who's really excellent at it.
I agree. But it's hard. But I've learned that I always put your aces in their places, and if you find a good team around you, that's what I try to do, and kind of look at my strengths, but also look at my weaknesses, and then hopefully somebody can fill in for my weakness for sure.
Absolutely.
It's really good. You've grown your practice, so obviously delegation's working. Is there anything else what kind of the key was to continue to grow your practice?
Yeah, I think over the years we learned a lot about hiring and we learned a lot about, who's a good fit for our culture and our values and who's not a good fit. And I'm really into culture building. So I see how important that's been in the process of building the practice. Like it's so amazing what you can do with a team of people when they're invested and they come to work excited and they're engaged and they believe in the mission of the company. So I think we've just gotten really good at hiring people who were the right fits and obviously not hiring people who weren't great fits and kind of not apologizing about that. So I think that's been one really key to our success.
Tell me a little bit about culture. What's culture to you, and how do you build it?
Yeah, I think culture for me, it really comes out of the values. So I did a lot of work on our values over the years. And I think a lot of times businesses, make these values and they put them up on the wall and they like, this is what we stand for, but then they're not actually living it out on a daily basis in the business. So we were very intentional about how do we actually incorporate these values into the structure of the business. So there's literally like processes we'd have with like meeting cadences and different committees that we've started and things so that we're literally living out the values of the practice. And so that it's a constant evolution. It's something that we're always working towards. We always ask the staff as well, like to give us feedback on how they think the leadership is living out the values of the practice. Their annual reviews are also based on how they're living out the values of the practice. So it's very much like infused into everything that we do. And I think for me, when I started the practice, really, I wanted to create a place that I didn't have when I was working for somebody else. And so that was a lot of what kind of went into those values and the structure initially. I'm a mom, I have 3 kids. Obviously am very career oriented, and wanted to have both, and it just was really hard to kind of feel like I was doing well at both things when I was working for somebody else because there just wasn't a whole lot of flexibility. So that was one thing that I made sure to build into the practice is that everybody, all of our therapists get to pick their own schedule. So that's the number one thing that we get feedback about that they like, because I think it just makes that work-life balance so much more attainable. So that's, from my own experiences too, is where a lot of the culture pieces have come from.
Feedback by the employees. Sometimes it's hard to hear, but if you take that feedback as a business owner, and try and implement some of it, it can make your business much more successful.
Yeah, we ask them for feedback I think on a twice yearly basis, and then we also it's just sort of like, at any point, if you have a suggestion or an idea, you can email me, you can email the COO. Like, people have suggested things that have been fantastic and we've implemented, and
Yeah, that's excellent. Tell me what do you think? Because you said you had a practice before, or you worked at a practice before. What are some of the mistakes you think owners do make with culture?
um, I think what I because I do a fair amount of business consulting, helping other private practice owners. So I see this is what I see among my consulting clients is that they try to kind of cater to everybody's needs and they don't do what's best for the business. So, like, employee A will come to them and say, I really need to be paid, this amount. And then they make this exception to pay this employee this amount. Well, then pretty soon everybody wants their own special deal. And then you're doing all kinds of different things. There's no standardization. You're, giving raises because you're afraid people are going to leave and it's all of a sudden you're not profitable. And that's just kind of one example that I see happen a lot is people, they want to keep employees and they think, oh, I'm just going to do whatever the employee asked me to do without realizing that it's not good for the business as a whole. um I think also what I see is that people think culture is just magically going to happen. Like, I'm going to bring this group of people together and it's just going to be great. And these people seem great. And I'm, like a nice person. And we're just going to all get along while we're working together, and they put no intentionality at all into culture and what they want that to look like. And then it's just kind of a free for all and maybe doesn't amount to much. So yeah, a fair amount of mistakes when it comes to culture.
No, I agree. What do you think makes up a good leader, though? Because I think as you kind of just mentioned, you can't just throw things against the wall. What makes a good leader to be able to maybe put that culture into place successfully?
Yeah, I think what I found is that and this is probably part of my personality as well, but I'm very consistent. Like, I think they see me show up in a consistent way, and I'm not the kind of person who's like gonna fly off the handle, or one day I'm like, you know, raging and the next day I'm calm, and like I'm not emotionally all over the place. I'm very consistent. And so I think they're like, okay, I know what to expect from Allison. And she's not going to make some like knee jerk decision or, you know, that kind of thing. So I think that gives them a feeling of safety for sure. I think also I really do genuinely appreciate when the staff gives feedback, and we've really done a lot. And this is still a work in progress with giving them the idea that, you can come to us with a complaint or constructive feedback, and like we will listen to you, we will consider it. You're not going to be made to feel ashamed because you brought up an idea, or shut down immediately because we think your suggestion is stupid or something like that. Like everything is fair game to be put on the table and open to consideration. And I think they really appreciate that as well, because then they know, like, my opinions matter, my feelings matter. And then even if I don't have an answer right away, I follow up, because I see a lot of times leaders are like, "Oh yeah, we'll think about that. We'll get back to you." And then they never get back to the person. And then I feel like that person feels like disrespected. And so even if it's something that, I go to the accountant and I say, "Hey, can we do X, Y, and Z?" And they're like, "No, you don't really have the money to do that." And then I have to go back and say, "I'm sorry, we can't do your suggestion." They appreciate the fact that I followed up. So I think those are things that they appreciate. There's a fair amount of transparency too with the practice. We do what's called a state of the practice meeting twice a year. So that's a company wide meeting where I go through and talk about, like, these are our goals for the year. This is how we're doing on our goals. This is what our budget looks like in terms of percentages. All kinds of things. These are, our goals for the next 6 months, that kind of thing. So I think they feel like, again, they're kind of getting a window into what's happening kind of on the leadership level of the business. What direction are we going? And they feel safe knowing that they kind of have a heads up about what's happening in the future.
I definitely love the transparency. I was a nursing home administrator, went into some of the, we'll call them broken buildings. They could be financially, could be clinically. And that was one of the biggest things that I feel, that turned the nursing home around, is standing up in front of all your staff and be very transparent and say the good, the bad, and maybe even the ugly,
Yep.
but just be honest and be honest about yourself. Hey, I messed up. I like the way you said about being consistent, because look, I make mistakes. I do some good things, but I do some bad things. So I was very always consistent. Tell them how I feel, hold them to the same standards as myself, and like I said, be very transparent in my meetings as well to make sure we're all on the same page. I love
Mhm.
that. I think
Mhm.
they're great ideas. Now I see why you're so successful, and
Oh,
it's
thank you.
very impressive. Very impressive. So, if you don't mind, change a little bit of the topic here, a little bit more to mental health. I think that's a topic that's near your heart, and a
Absolutely.
little bit myself. Yes, I'm a volunteer paramedic, and I see it when I'm out some of the EMS calls.
Mhm.
So, let me ask you this: what is the biggest mental health misconception you see among entrepreneurs?
Hmm. Related to themselves or just in general?
Uh, Either way, it's fine. Either way, we can handle that.
Yeah, I think a lot of, well, I guess what comes to mind is that I think a lot of times there's a perception that, there's, people who have more severe mental illness, and then there's everybody else who's fine. And I think that, obviously it's on a spectrum, right? Like maybe a bell curve of, sure, you're going to have your folks who are more mentally ill. And then you're going to have a whole bunch of people that struggle with mental health issues and still go to work every day and parent and, all the rest of that. And then there's going to be people who are pretty mentally healthy on the other end of the bell curve. So, um, I think that people, especially entrepreneurs, have to realize that, like, people are dealing with a lot of stuff on a regular basis. Even if you are a pretty mentally healthy person, like, you could go through a death in your family or a divorce or, any one of those really significant life changes that just causes a lot of emotional distress. And I think it's important to, um, you know, show your employees that it's okay to, kind of talk about mental health in the workplace. And, if they need help, they can, go to HR and talk about, what resources they might have to help them. Um, and just, I think from a leadership perspective, I think if you can kind of, name it and, um, show your employees it's okay to talk about. I think that's really huge because people wait so long to reach out for help for various reasons. And I think that if we have more of a discussion about it and it's more acceptable to talk about it in the workplace, people would get help a lot sooner.
Well, you actually transitioned me right in my next question about
Oh,
waiting too
perfect.
long. What are the early warning signs of burnout you think most people miss?
That's a great question. I feel like burnout is such a complicated topic. And I'm sure there's tons of research on it. And I think that what's so difficult about it is that it probably looks different for different people, and that, it's really hard to see what's happening to you when it's like I had a professor in graduate school that said it's hard to see the picture when you're inside the frame. And
Mm,
I always loved that because, I was talking to a friend not too long ago who's also a private practice owner and does business consulting, and she's incredible. And she, was kind of talking about some of her struggles. And I said to her, "It sounds like you're burned out." And I think she had that look on her face like, "Oh, yeah, maybe I am burned out." And I don't think she realized it. So I think that's one thing that's so hard is you don't realize it's happening maybe until it's like so far down the path that you're just like completely exhausted and then feel like you can't do anything about it. So I think you have to really be aware of your own kind of signs or symptoms of like, how do I know I'm getting burned out? Well, maybe I start like not sleeping that well, or maybe I quit exercising because I get too busy. And then that's like a snowball effect into burnout or whatever that might be. But I think it's just like that self awareness of what are those things for you. And then obviously trying to do something about it before it gets really severe.
yes, I agree. When I was younger, I owned a landscaping company, and you're exactly right. I started not sleeping, started not working out, a little more of a fat on my belly a little bit, and I didn't notice it. I just kept going, 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 right? And one day I think I woke up and realized, whoa, this is you're a whole different Bill. 2, 3 years later,
Yep.
it's but you need to manage it and you gotta learn it, and it's hard because you have daily duties you gotta do and you gotta keep going for
Yep.
sure.
Yep.
Yeah. But what mental patterns hold people back in their business, do you think?
Oh, I think there's so many sort of, the term now is like mindset issues, right? So I think people have, mindset issues around like what they're capable of, their own self confidence, around money. I see that issue with money come up a lot because obviously in a business, you have to sort of make strategic investments to get to the next level. So you have to put out some money before you start seeing the money coming back into the business. And I think people get stuck at that point and they're just like, well, I can't afford to hire an assistant. I can't afford to, open a new office or whatever. And it's like, well, you kind of can't afford not to because you're going to stay stuck at the income level that you're at if you don't do those things. So I think that's a big issue that I see. And I think also people, like I said, kind of maybe lack their own self confidence. Like I always look at the next level. I've never done any of this before. I was trained to be a therapist. I never owned a business. And I just think that like if I want to achieve something, I've just figured out that what works for me is like reaching out to experts, doing my own research. Like I've started a few adjacent mental health businesses. Like I didn't know how to do any of those either, but I just like kept asking and researching and figured it out how to do it. And then I was able to do it. So I think that's another thing that people are like, "Oh, well, I've never done this," or you can think of a million reasons why you shouldn't do something, right? So what I tell people is like, think of a million reasons why you should do something and why it could work, you know? Because I think it's just your own thoughts holding you back sometimes.
I do agree. Attitude is a big part of it. That positivity versus negativity. How you frame the question, positive versus negative,
Yep.
can definitely change. I will tell you, I struggle with this a little bit as a business owner. This next question. What do you think? What's the difference between mental toughness and emotional avoidance?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, when I think of the term mental toughness, I think about resilience, right? Like we can run into lots of problems and figure out, instead of falling into a hole and becoming the victim, we can figure out how to keep moving through those things, and still achieve what we need to achieve. Um, and then what was the other one? Emotional avoidance.
And mental toughness versus what else again?
Emotional.
Mental toughness and emotional avoidance.
Yeah. So I think emotional avoidance obviously is like, I don't want to deal with XYZ. So I'm just going to pretend it's not there. I'm not going to talk to that person, whatever. But I think that keeps you stuck because ultimately, the only way to deal with something a lot of times is to go through it. So, in terms of your question, I think mental toughness is better.
Got it. Alison, I love this podcast with you because you just set me up for the next question, the word stuck. So I really appreciate you. Um, what do you say to someone who feels stuck but doesn't know why?
Mm. Yeah, I think that's where, again, you have to sort of dig down into like, I'm a big, when I was practicing therapy, I did a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy, which basically is just like looking at your thoughts and how your thoughts influence your feelings and your behaviors. So that's what my mind goes back to is like, okay, well, what is your thoughts actually telling you in those situations? So again, like, um is it I can't do it because of money, I can't do it because I don't know how to do it, I can't do it because what if something goes wrong, I won't be able to handle it, like all of these sort of like negative thoughts that can pop up. And I think also sometimes people can be ambivalent about growing a bigger business, or maybe they feel like, oh, this is taking on a ton of responsibility. Like, I think a lot of times too, when they think about expansion, they're like, well, I'm just going to be working all the time then, like, and that's what a lot of people ask me, like, oh, you have 85 employees. Like, do you just work like 80 hours a week? And I say, no, I actually work less than I used to when the practice was smaller because I can hire people and delegate things that I used to have to do because we had no money. Um, so it actually gets easier as you get bigger, which I think a lot of people don't realize. So yeah, and I'm a big proponent of therapy too. So I mean, I think part of that could be a great reason to go to therapy and talk through, why do I feel stuck and what is happening that's, making me think I can't do this.
Yes. What's something people can do today to start improving their emotional health?
Mm, there's a lot of answers to that.
How about what's the first thing that came to your mind? What do you think? What do you think? Especially as a business owner. Let's say I'm struggling, I'm working tons of hours. What's maybe one of the first things I can do to help me improve my mental health?
Yeah, I think one thing that goes out the door pretty quickly when you're building a business is, especially in the beginning stages, is you just feel like you're working all the time and you're not taking care of yourself. So, so much of mental health is wrapped up in like sleep and are you eating well and are you exercising and all of that kind of stuff. I think learning mindfulness exercises too is really helpful. So, like, just learning to be present in the moment. So, even if I have 5 minutes, I might walk outside onto my deck and just look out into the trees in my backyard and just notice, oh, there's a squirrel in the tree. There's the winds, moving the branches, whatever, just so like my brain doesn't have to be on all the time. And so I think that can be really powerful as well, even though it seems like a super simple suggestion. But anything you can do to kind of give your brain a break, because otherwise your brain's going to be fried.
I agree.
Yeah.
I do jujitsu, and it's my mental break of the week to go out and just do jujitsu, clear my mind, turn my phone off. It definitely for me it helps. What's the what's the most healing sentence you ever heard?
Mm. Wow, you're asking the hard questions today.
I knew you were up for it though, Allison. I knew it.
um I don't know if this fits exactly, but one of my favorite quotes is like, I'm sure you may have heard of it. It's like be kind to everyone because they're
Mm.
fighting a battle you may know nothing about. So that's kind of a way I live my life, because I think everybody is going through stuff, and to be kind doesn't take any, time or any more time or money or anything. And people really appreciate it. Even if it's just like, oh, I held the door open for somebody at the grocery store. Like that might, you know, really make their day, that act of kindness. So
No, I love that. You know, when I was an administrator, I felt I had some good days, but I had my bad days. And a nurse aide came in one day. I was very upset with her. She came in one day and she said to me, "We talked, you know, what was going on." And she started to leave the room and she said to me, "Sir, I just wish that you management team would sometime take a step back and just realize we're going through some things at home."
yeah,
And she goes in, I don't mean this negative, but there's difference between nurse's aide versus a nurse versus you as an administrator. I wish you guys would just take a little step back sometimes. That truly affected my whole leadership. Like I actually thanked her. I let her go. I thought about it, and I went and found her a few days later and actually thanked her because to me that was just very impactful on me. And she's
yeah,
so current, so
yeah,
good.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yes. All right, so let's take the pressure off you a little bit and let's turn to this instead. What is one challenge our listener community could help you solve?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, so our biggest challenge in the practice really is always hiring therapists. We never have any trouble finding clients. But if anybody knows of any mental health licensed therapists in the Pittsburgh area, we are actually in the process of expanding our office there. And so if you know anyone looking for a job, please send them our way.
I
That
will
would be
definitely.
great.
Yes, I will definitely do that. I'll highlight that for sure. For sure. Where do you see your company in, say, next 3 to 5 years?
That's a question I get asked a lot, and I honestly have trouble answering it because it's already grown past my wildest expectations.
Hmm.
And so I feel like there's a constant push pull in like my mind of like, how much bigger do we get? What if we grow to this point? What does that mean for me and what I do on a daily basis and all of that kind of thing? So that definitely is something that's not as clear cut for me. A couple of things we're working on. We're not necessarily, unless there's some amazing opportunity that comes along, we're not necessarily going to keep adding offices, I think, in the near future. I think we're just going to try to maximize what we already have, and starting some different programming, and also looking at the possibility of bringing a psychiatrist on to the staff because we don't have any prescribers currently. So that would be a pretty big addition to our services. I'm also in the process of starting what we're calling a sister practice or partner practice. So we're looking at a smaller practice that would specialize in couples, seeing couples and families. So that's something we're working on right now.
That sounds really exciting.
Yeah, thank
Your
you.
face lit up for sure. You're looking
Yeah.
to say it. So that's definitely good. So the first half of the show we learn from you. Second half, I'd like to learn more about you. So take me back in time, little Allison. Did you know? Did you know that you'd be running and growing a company?
No, I did not actually. So when I was a kid, I wanted to be a writer. And I think I also wanted to own a bakery. Um, and then when I got into high school, I kind of didn't really know. I was always interested in owning a business, but then went into college and met a woman who would eventually become my mentor, a professor who got me really interested in psychology and really encouraged me to become a therapist. So that's the direction I went. So I thought I was actually going to become like a hospital administrator.
Hmm. Hmm. So what made you land into psychology slash really now being more of a your private practice?
Yeah, I was always fascinated by psychology, and kind of started down that path, and obviously that's a long road of, graduate school and then working to become licensed, and kind of worked my way up through the agency where I was working and realized that, like, oh, like, what's the next step? And I had kind of like hit the pinnacle other than becoming a hospital administrator.
Hmm.
And I at the time I actually got really burned out. I had 2 little kids at home. Nobody was sleeping through the night, and I just felt like I was just putting out fires at work and, you know, not being as good of a mom at home as I wanted to be, and I was just like, that was definitely a big burnout point for me, and I didn't know what else to do, so I went to therapy, and the therapist said, "Why don't you start your own practice?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, that sounds like a good idea." So I thought about it for a little while, and then I gave my employer 6 weeks notice, and I started practice in that time.
Very nice. Well, you recognized your burnout. You took care of it, huh?
Well, not until it was, pretty severe and I was ready to quit my job.
Yeah. You said you do consulting now. Is that correct?
I do, yes.
Tell me a little bit about that, please.
Yeah, I love it because, it's just a different kind of hat I get to wear. When you're a therapist, you can't be as direct with people because you kind of need to lead them to sort of make their own decisions. But as a consultant, I can say like, "Oh, I think that's a good idea. I don't think that's a good idea. You should go in this direction, not that direction." I get to be a lot more directive. So, um, it's just really fun to work with people who are motivated to, grow and improve their businesses and
Businesses and
walk alongside them when they have successes and support them when, they try something and it doesn't work out like how they thought it would. I just look at business as like it's just one unending puzzle. And I love the problem solving nature of it. So yeah, that's what
yeah,
I do with consulting.
nice. What's your ideal client then that you work with?
I really like to take a really common spot that people find themselves in is they'll grow group practice, maybe have 10 to 12 clinicians, and then they want to get bigger and they don't know how to do it. So that's, 10 to 12 clinicians is like you as the owner can still kind of manage everything yourself. But then when you grow beyond that, well, now you need a leadership team and you need, all that kind of stuff. So I like helping people kind of grow beyond that point. Something else that I have become known for that was, I don't know if you could say it was accidental, but it's very common in our industry for people to have contractors, 1099 contractors, and then the shift has been in the past couple of years more to change folks over to W-2 employees. So I did the same thing back in 2019, 2020. So because I have that experience, people reach out to me who want to change their contractors to W-2 employees.
Nice, very nice. What if I'm driving my car and I'm kind of hearing this podcast and I'm like, I do. Let's say I have 6 clinicians and I want to grow to that 10 or 12. What are for the first couple things you would say to them?
Yeah, what I tend to talk to people about and kind of my perspective is like you want to create your practice to fit your life.
Hmm,
So you want, obviously everybody has personal obligations and families and all that kind of stuff. And so, some people will say, well, like, I don't want to see any more clients. I just want to run the business, which is what I wanted to do. And I'm like, okay, great. We can design the business to meet that goal. And it's like, no, I still want to keep a handful of clients. I can never stop practicing, but I also want, XYZ for a practice. And so we can then design it to meet those goals. Or it's like, I need to make, X number of dollars per year to support my family or whatever that income goal is. So we talk about, okay, great. Like, I've had people say, I need to make, $300,000 a year. Like, awesome. Well, now we know what your number is and what the goal is, and we can figure out, how many clinicians you need to, get to that number. And then obviously what goes along with that is building out all of the leadership and support, administrative support systems and all that stuff a practice that size would need. So yeah, that's what we talk about a lot of times. And obviously delegation is a lot of the conversation about that. People always have trouble delegating, so we got to talk through that as well. Yeah.
We talked about it a little bit earlier. Why do you think? I mean, I know we kind of touched this a little bit. Why do you think people have such a really hard time delegating? Like, just
I think because it's like their business is their baby, and obviously, like, their reputation is all wrapped up in the practice, right? And so they're like, "Oh no, what if I hire a therapist who's doing something that's not good therapy, and then that reflects on me as the owner, and that ruins my reputation?" Or like I said before, how do I know I'm going to delegate this thing to somebody? How am I going to know they're doing it right? You know?
Mhm.
And I don't want to wake up one day and realize, like we have $100,000 in unpaid claims or something like that.
Yeah,
So lots of scary scenarios I think that people imagine. And so they're just like, well, I'm just going to keep doing it myself.
yeah. How do you help specifically in your industry? How do you get people to delegate and get over those fears that you just mentioned?
Yeah, I think a lot of people need help with their hiring process. Like I said in the beginning, like that took a long time for us to hone that and realize that like the things we're looking for, the things that are kind of red flags in the interview process. So that's, step one. And then step two is like there's a whole sort of process, right, of like training and then kind of stepping back a little bit, but not the whole way, and then seeing how they do, and then stepping back a little bit more and seeing how they do. It's like you kind of can't just like, they walk in day one, like, here's the job, see you later. Like, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
It has to be a process of kind of like training them, giving them a little independence to do it on their own, coming back, checking in. And then we talk about too, like once the person's fully trained and they're doing a good job and you trust them, you still need to set up things like reports and check-in meetings, and like I need to know like every month when we check in, I need you to tell me how many, for my billing person, like how many claims are still unpaid after 30 days, and what's the data point on this and that and the other thing, so that I, at this point, because I've been doing this for 10 years, can really easily look at a report and see, oh, things are running fine versus like, oh no, there's a problem. I can open my bank account and see, like, oh, the deposit comes every Wednesday from the insurance company. It's about this much money. If it's something other than that, then that means I got to go investigate what's happening. So I think it's those kinds of things that a lot of practice owners struggle with, like, what data am I supposed to look at? How am I going to know if something's going wrong? And we have to like dive into those details for them.
It seems like you put some really great systems in place for them to make it a little bit easier for them.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and that's how I have to run my practice because I feel like I wouldn't sleep at night if I didn't have
Yeah,
it that way.
yeah, I agree. How about this? If you can go back in time and meet yourself the day you founded your company, what advice would you give yourself?
Oh, I had a business coach, not at that time, but a few years later, who told me to think bigger.
Hmm,
And I think that's what I would have told myself at the time, to think bigger. Because in the beginning, I was like, I'm just gonna hire a few people. It'll just be some like supplemental income for me. Or like, I'll just have 10 therapists and then I'll be making six figures and
yeah,
that'll be great. I'll just stop there.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you've grown very successful, so that's really good. Outside of work, what do you do? What's your passions outside of work?
Yeah, I have 3 boys, so a lot of what with they're 13, 11, and almost 6, so a lot of things that I do kinda revolve around them. I love doing new things with them, like, that's such a joy for me as a parent to, like, like, you name it, like, go to the aquarium and they see, like, a shark for the first time or whatever it is, you know what I mean? And just, like, to see their reactions and see, like, their brain making connections, like, um yeah, such a joy for me. So I definitely like traveling. I've been traveling a lot more. Even if it's just like I'm gonna go to another city on the weekend. just to kind of like discover a new place or just to have a break from being at home, because when you're at home, you kind of are seeing like, oh, I gotta call the handyman to fix that thing. And, oh, I didn't clean out the garage yet. And, you have all those things on your mind. And it's like just nice to kind of have a break, even if it's for 1 or 2 nights. I read a lot, obviously read a lot of business books, try to read other things, just whatever sparks my interest. I'm a big like nonfiction reader because I like to learn new things. And I feel like too, as I've gotten older, it's become really important for me to maintain my friendships and time with my family, because, obviously relationships are so important.
Right.
So really try to make the effort to spend time with friends.
Yeah. Balance is definitely important. What was your favorite place you traveled to?
Ever in my whole life?
Sure. I'll say yes.
Okay. So when I was in college, I went on a study abroad program called Semester at Sea, which used to be sponsored by University of Pittsburgh, which is where I went to school. And we went to South Africa. That was one of the 10 places we went. And so that was by far my favorite place.
Wow. What's the favorite part of it?
I think what was so cool about it was just it had so many different kind of like landscapes and different animals that you don't see in other places. Like we went to a beach where there were just like wild penguins hanging out on the beach. And, it's just like so many, the history of apartheid. And like we went to Robben Island where Nelson Mandela was imprisoned. And yeah, just all of the landscapes and the different things that there were to do there was amazing. And it's beautiful.
I have not been there, but I've heard it is. So I'll have to put that on my bucket list for sure.
Yes, I'd recommend.
What's one favorite book would you recommend, say, in business, and maybe one favorite book in psychology/mental health that you would recommend to the viewers?
Oh, yeah. So, I would say it's psychology like. So I think anybody really could enjoy it, but there's a book called The Power of Regret, I believe. I think is it by Daniel Pink? Maybe I'm messing that up, but that was a really excellent book about research around regret and how it, can motivate people to do different things. And so yeah, I highly recommend that one.
Good.
I would say as far as a business book, there's so many that I've read. Obviously, Rich Dad Poor Dad is a, classic that lots of people read. I think that was something that really helped me, because I was not raised in a family of entrepreneurs. My parents were, had regular jobs working for other people, and we were a middle class family, and so there was never any discussion about, how to build wealth or anything like that, anything about entrepreneurship. So that was all having to be self-taught. So that was one of the first things I read. Another one that I really like too is called The Best Place to Work. And that is about the research around why people stay in a workplace. So that's a great one as well.
Perfect. So if any viewers want to reach out to you, how would they come in contact with you, connect with you?
Yeah, you can email me. It's pigeon@moveforwardpa.com. Pigeon has a D in it. I'm also I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. So if people want to connect through LinkedIn, that's a great way as well.
Okay, perfect. Well, I want to really thank you, Alison. I think I had a great time here today. Some great insights by you. I really appreciate you and all your thoughts. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. I had a good time.
I want to thank the audience. If you learned something today or laughed, please tell someone about the podcast. We're having real conversations with business owners. If we gave you something to think about, please hit subscribe. Again, Alison, thank you so much. This has been another exciting episode of Steel City Growth. See you next time.
That's a wrap on another episode of Steel City Growth. Thanks for joining us. For show notes and more, visit steelcitygrowth.live. Until next time.